All right. Geez, do we? So wait, is Stan trying to get in or
I don't know. He was trying to get in, but then he's disappeared from texting and everything, so I don't know. But we have.
are we? Oh, okay, we have.
Yes, Lisa's here in the room.
Oh, great. All right. Well, then I would call us to order for the oh, and here's Stan. For the Teton County Library Board meeting, Thursday, May 18th, 2023. Present virtually, we have Nina Lenz, Stan Steiner, and in person there at the library, we've got Lisa McGee. First thing on the agenda, shall we move? Would anyone like to move to approve the May 18th, 2023 regular board meeting agenda?
I'll move.
Any motion? All right. Do I have a second?
Dan, you're on mute, but I can second.
All right. Any discussion?
I second.
All right.
Does that work?
Perfect. Any discussion? All right, hearing none. Move on to the approval of minutes. I will move to approve the minutes of the March 16th, 2023 regular board meeting as presented. Do we have a second?
One second.
All right, any discussion? All right, hearing none.
Yeah.
On to the approval of the voucher meeting. I will go ahead and move to approve the meetings of the April 20th, 2023 voucher meeting as presented. Do I have a second?
Sean, we didn't approve the minutes.
Oh,
We asked for, we have to ask for the actual vote.
sorry, I'm just, thank you for, once again, this is, all right, so wait. So are we approving them? I'm asking.
All in favor, say aye.
All excellent, thank you. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The important step. Kip, thank you for that. All right, back on track. Now I will move to approve the minutes of the April 20th, 2023 voucher meeting as presented. Do we have a second? All right, any discussion on that? All right, hearing none. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. Moving on, public comment. Kip, do we have any?
There's no one else online right now and no one present, so I guess none.
All right. And any correspondence to be discussed?
Receive any correspondence?
Everything's a little bit sore and
All right.
sometimes, but I think.
Moving on to the consent agenda. First, staff report on the financial narrative.
Hi, morning.
Probably a big note is that we continue to receive pretty good interest income with the county's banking. Receiving $11,000. I think at some point I might need to sit down with Kip and discuss if we want to move some of this interest income to whatever reserve accounts, but that's to be discussed later. Overall, in terms of where we're at for the fiscal year, since we're 1 month away, I did include a little bit of a narrative regarding where we're at. Overall, we're at 71% of our projected income. And total expenses are almost at 80% for the year. So overall, I suspect we might come in a little under budget in terms of expenditures. There are a couple of accounts that have hit 100% of their budget thus far, but with everything else, I think we'll still even out, and I don't anticipate that we will go over budget overall. In this month's vouchers, we also had 2 vouchers that were over the $7,000 amount. However, both of those items were pre-approved by the board as annual expenses that we will have every year. One of those was for Veronix, which is our deep freeze and our rebooting software, essentially helps us with our antivirus needs. And the other voucher was for the Wyoming Local Government Liability Pool. That's our annual employee insurance. And that amount this year was a little over 8,000. It was a big jump from last year. And the reason for that is that in fiscal year 21, we had overpaid. So last year they credited us back. So now we're kind of back to where we should be in terms of the expenditure there. Any questions for anyone?
I have none. Anyone else? All right. Then all right, is there anything further we need to discuss on this before we move to approve? All right. Could I have a motion to approve the May 18th, 2023 consent agenda?
I move we approve the 2023 consent agenda.
And a second?
Second.
All right. Any discussion on that? All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, moving on to the Jackson Main Branch HVAC service contract.
We have
From
Rick.
whom? Is Rick present? Oh, there he is. All right.
Good
morning.
morning. So Smith, Facilities Maintenance Coordinator, and this staff report is for the heating, ventilation, air conditioning service agreement for the Jackson branch. In consideration of entering into a 2-year agreement with Long Building Technologies for preventive mechanical maintenance and control system service. The current agreement has expired and we have an agreement for a new one. We contacted 6 companies and we received 1 bid. That was from Long Building Technologies. This will be funded through the operations budget. The amount we budgeted is about $700 over what the contract amount will be. So we came in under budget. And the Long Building Technologies has been the provider of our service contract for many years, and they do an outstanding job. Suggested motion is to approve the award of the contract for HVAC services at Jackson Branch to Long Building Technologies.
All right, Rick, thank you for your work on that. Before we make that motion, any questions or anything like that? All right, I would move that the board approve the award of contract for HVAC services at the Jackson Main Branch Library to Long Building Technologies in the amount of $19,847. Do we have a second?
I'll second.
Any further discussion on that? Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right. So let it be done. Now. The seasonal hourly adjustment, staff report on that.
Sure, I'm sure there's gonna be a fun conversation. Library hours, so back at the beginning of the year, in response to community surveys and community retreat data, we decided to expand library hours to an extra hour in the evening and Sunday hours. As anticipated, actually. What the community says they would like to see the library do and what they're actually taking advantage of are two different things. Across my career, every community that I've worked in, the community has said, we want more library hours, give them more library hours, and they don't use them. So this is not unusual. If you go back and look at all of our past library space use studies, the last hour that ever went past 7 o'clock at the library has been woefully underutilized. And so the last two studies that we have done back in February and again in May, April, May, reflects the same thing. The biggest thing to note is that the youth wing usually has 0 users in it from 7 to 8. There's, I think, one day in one of the studies where there was 1 person in the youth wing. So what had originally been the plan was to recommend that we for the summer, move to 7 o'clock closing because nobody's going to be in the library in the summer after probably at all, any evening hour. But based on the data, looking back at all the old data we've had pre-COVID, the staff or the leadership team is recommending that we just make 7 o'clock the closing time for the library year round, rather than seasonal. So that is our recommendation. We strongly recommend keeping Sunday hours. They're not wildly busy, but if you extrapolate as an 8-hour day, it's as busy as a Saturday, if not a little bit busier. The Friday hours during the school year, it's been a problem for youth getting out of the building, having their parents pick them up after school. So we are recommending that during the school year, the Labor Day to Memorial Day, that we keep Fridays till 6. So that is our recommendation, and I would entertain any questions. No questions?
Anyone?
Okay. Then I guess it's on to the motion, Sean.
Yeah,
Just
so
long. It's very long.
and I'm actually not seeing it on the one that I printed out. Let me see if my
The staff report, do you have that?
I can do it. I have it.
Okay, Lisa will read it.
Okay.
all right, thank you, Lisa.
Sure. I move to set Jackson Main Branch library hours as Monday through Thursday, 9 a.m. to 7 p.m. Friday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. between Memorial Day and Labor Day. Friday, 9 a.m. to 6 p.m. between Labor Day and Memorial Day. Saturday, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. and Sunday, 1 p.m. to 5 p.m. between Labor Day to Memorial Day. with an effective date of May 29th, 2023.
All right, do we have a second on that?
Second.
All right, any discussion? I would say that having, when I was reading through that, it seemed really well considered and seems very sensible to me. So all in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right. On to the Wonder Institute Recording Studio Memorandum of Understanding. And
That has actually been removed from the agenda after discussion with Abigail. It's not necessary for the board to approve it.
All right.
So therefore, it's there for your information.
Excellent. Well, then my apologies for bringing that up. All right, on to other reports. Kip, your director's report.
Sure. It's mostly full of the past 2 months statistics and data, reports from the various departments. The two things that are worth noting, however, staffing, hiring at the library, looks like we're going to go down that road of losing employees and having to replace them again. Amy Fullweiler left the children's wing as senior library assistant at the end of this, well, last week, I believe, was her last day. And she's been replaced, excuse me, by Marissa Logan, who comes to us from the Children's Museum. She's been providing 2 of the after-school programs this year. So she's very familiar with the library. Many of the kids know her. She's a great asset. She started as part-time because she's still working at the Children's Museum, but will assume full-time role later this month or later in June. And then on the adult side, Senior Library Assistant Karen Chow has accepted an artist in residence offer in Roswell, New Mexico, and will be leaving us on June 1st. I believe it's her last day, or June 2nd. And so we have we'll be starting recruitment this week to fill that position. The IT position continues to be vacant. So I don't know, we just keep hoping, I guess. Tied to staffing and hiring, the foundation's apartment is available now as of June 1st. We did a staff round. We had 2 staff who were interested, one of them being Karen, and she obviously had to decline. The other staff member ended up deciding to decline. So I think we will be able to use it as a recruitment tool for either the IT position or if the commissioners approve our budget, we do have 2 new positions to fill in that. So I think we're sort of situated in a good place that we might be able to recruit somebody and give them housing for up to 2 years. So that I think we're fortunate to have that space available right now. The other item in my report would be the FY24 budget. I presented the budget as the board approved it back in March, I guess. And it was well received. They are still very appreciative of the work the library is doing. They were very supportive of the 2 position requests. They really like the fact that we would be taking over passport acceptance services from the clerk of the court. They think it's a better place for it, and I would agree with that. And they're very excited about the makerspace that's in the works. So they were supportive of our 2 positions. That said, the county is looking at a $19 million deficit, and in large part because of the very expensive courthouse that they do have to build next year. So there's no reserve funds or anything, so they were looking for $19 million to cut from the budget. And through mostly capital requests, there were a lot of projects that were going to be fully funded next year, even though they would carry over into the next fiscal year. So they're shifting a lot of, well, partially fund this year in FY24 and then fully fund in FY25. So they were able to find about $17 million, and that left $2 million. And they came back and asked department directors to cut up to 3% from their operating budget. And for us, that was just under $50,000. And our part-time library assistant budget was an easy place to find some money, because we just estimate how many hours each one of our part-time assistants will work. And so we had estimated 18, which has been an overestimate. And so I lowered that to 17 hours, and that gave us a little over $15,000. And then we have in our budget, health insurance contingency, should health insurance rates rise in January of the calendar years. And that's actually not, that fund hasn't been used, because the county will just do a budget adjustment if there are, for all the departments. So we don't really need that contingency built into our budget. So that was $35,000, and that brought us in just over $50,000. I do not know yet if they will actually implement the cut or not. They are still having discussions. The final decision, I believe, will be made next week, and then they will post the budget. So we'll know next week if they actually accept the cut or not. So that's the two highlights from my budget, or my report. Any questions about those two items or anything else?
I have none. Thank you, Kip. Anyone else?
Okay.
All right. Moving on to the foundation report. Deanna?
Thank you so much. A couple of highlights. I have the report here. I was going to hand it to you, but we'll get this uploaded to a link in your agenda today. But just a few highlights I wanted to share is we are working with library staff right now on our budget for the fiscal year 24. And I've had one-on-one meetings with staff, and they have completed all of the funding request applications. A new piece that we've implemented this year. Everyone's been incredibly supportive of the decision to ask a few more questions about each of the programs that they're proposing, and each of the expenses. And they've been very, really welcoming and supportive of that. Those have been completed, and Kip now has them, and he's reviewing them for submission to the foundation. So we will have a draft budget to propose to our board next month, that we'll be able to share with you on what those asks look like to the foundation for fiscal year 24. In addition to that, we're not sure who's heard, but we are working with the Friends as merging our organizations together. So both boards have overwhelmingly been supportive of that decision. And we've formed an ad hoc committee that has both board members from both organizations to work on that implementation process and that transition. Right now, we've created a timeline and checklist. We've been meeting regularly for discussions and questions, and we're working on those obvious things, which are how do we organize and make sure that we can maintain and retain all the important programs that both organizations are really passionate about. And then, how do we meld these two boards and have proper representation and all of that good stuff. So we're working on that. We hope to have, our timeline is kind of ambitious. We hope to have this completed by July, August. But of course, we're all patient and open to the fact that it may take a little bit longer, but we are very enthusiastic about this merged organization going forward. We feel like, I don't know if you've heard any of the discussions, but we just feel like this is going to be a great way for us to really join our efforts together to support the library, create more of an efficiency in terms of our engagement with Kip and how much time we share with him, and also to help our those supporters out there in the community just not be confused by the fact that there are 2 library support organizations and how can they be a part of each. This will give them an opportunity to just really understand that there's one support organization and there's different ways for them to get involved within that organization. So we are really excited about it. The third thing I wanted to share is that our strategic planning process is in the final stages. We just had a board session on March 26th. Got a lot of great board feedback after our community retreat and after our outreach to individual stakeholders and members of the community. So now our board has a chance to weigh in. We've got a final, what we perceive as a final draft of our goals and strategies. The draft is right now in the steering committee's hands to review, and then we'll be distributing that to our board next Monday, the 22nd. So hopefully we'll have that for you all to review soon to see how we hope to become a stronger and better organization to support the library and what our priorities will be in the next few years. And then the rest of my report is just, I was able to really participate heavily in the last 2 months in a lot of library programs, attend a lot of library programs, which I think is so important for us as a foundation to really understand what these programs look like and feel like, how they impact the community and how the community responds and engages with the library. And so I did give a summary of each of those programs that were attended in the last couple of months. And just really encouraging things to see. And I think a great thing for us to be able to witness and share with our community. So I'll hope you have a chance to look and see just my personal opinion on all the programs that we attended this last couple of months. That's it for me.
All right, thank you so much. And that's really terrific news about the progression of the merger between the two. So way to go. And speaking of that, do we have a representative from the Friends?
Virginia is here.
Aha.
Hi, I wasn't asked by the president to give a talk about the merger because so much is going on, and I support everything that you just said, Diana. I was going to just mention that we are very much devoted and dedicated to the book nook and are continuing to work hard on that, and that's our big money raiser. We also have 10 little free libraries that we're thoroughly enjoying, and once the new museum gets put up, the 10th one will be operational right in that structure. And free libraries. There was one other thing I was supposed to mention. I should have written it down. Oh, well, anyway, things are going along as Diana described, and that's perhaps what I can my contribution. Thank you.
I have one question, if I may. Diana, you said the strategic plan is wrapping up soon. The merger with Friends of the Foundation might be another month or so. Is the strategic plan reflective of that merger, or are you gonna have to update it?
It is reflective. That's a great question. Yes, it's interesting because we're trying to be mindful of the language because the transition hasn't occurred yet. And so it's interesting that in some of the strategies and goals, we speak as the foundation, and yet in others, we directly reference us as if we were already together. So it's a little bit, you'll see when it comes out. We're hoping to really fine tune that language, but yes, it is reflective.
But for many years now, we have been using the designation Foundation and Friends.
Okay, great.
So we always try to link those together to help understand that we are both supporters of the library, and how it can be, how we may end up saying it the same way, but with a slightly different message. Thanks, Devin.
All right, thank you so much.
can I ask a question while you're considering things? And I am leaving. I know I'm a lame duck. So, I'm trying to keep my opinions to myself, but, I've always wondered, and maybe, Abigail, you can speak to this too, but often if you're looking for diversity and inclusion on your board, some of the foundation events are expensive for board members to attend. And I've always wondered why there hasn't been some attempts to help board members attend those events. And I don't know if that's like self-dealing or something like that, that would be inappropriate. And I don't know that you need to offer 5 tickets to get everybody there, but maybe offering 1 or 2 to try and encourage some people who can't afford to attend to be able to attend those programs and be more involved on that side and see a little bit of what's happening. Just a thought to ponder as you move forward, and I will not benefit from this. So, I'm not asking for myself. I mean, I am, because I can't afford to attend a lot of those things, but just to consider, so.
Thank you, Nina. That is great feedback. And in fact, we heard that repeatedly at our community retreat from members of the community who said it feels a bit exclusive and it feels a bit like there are folks that want to participate and can't. So what actually was suggested repeatedly at that retreat was that we add additional events that, so we have various events that kind of meet all economic abilities, and also that we add more events that are not only fundraising, but also donor appreciation type events, where the donors and supporters are actually guests of that event. They're not have to purchase a ticket. It's not a fundraiser. So these will all be incorporated into our strategic plan on ways we can definitely be a much more inclusive organization in terms of our events.
Great.
Thank you. That's great feedback.
Any other questions? All right. Now we will move on to matters from board members, library staff, and supporting organizations. And we are going to discuss proposed revisions to the board bylaws.
I brought handouts for this. I apologize for not having this available to everyone sooner, but I also think it makes sense, since we have some time today, it's a shorter meeting, to go through them and make sure everyone's clear, in case they want to tweak anything, they can, have a discussion about it now. Kip, do you have the thumb drive I gave you? And then go into the folder that says new folder. And then there are, I think, 3 documents. I think you want the one that says ASM revised. And if you can send that to the folks on Zoom.
Was that the same document that was linked in or the most current version? There was a link in the agenda. And I have that open.
Link to the draft I had that
The one that you've been working on is what's
Right.
like.
right, actually, that's.
Is that fine?
Yeah, that's fine. I'd like everyone to see my update to that,
Okay.
to go through it.
This is the updated, and that's the draft.
Yeah, I think you might send my version to everyone or link it, replace it with the one. I'm not quite sure how we want to do that, but in case people wanna,
Sure. How to get it.
send me red lines between now and adoption. So I'm just gonna pause for a minute to make sure people get this version in front of them
Hang on here.
successfully.
I'm gonna have to go to Outlook and email it to them.
All right, well, I can actually take a minute to do a little bit of background on what I think I know about the origins of this document. Are even though I can't see them anymore, are the
They're still there.
board members still there? You can hear me?
Yes, we
Yes.
can hear you.
So this document, I think it's fair, what, Kip, you took the first run at it, correct? And then the committee, which consisted of Stan and Lisa, looked at it and thought it looked, good. And I think Peter also looked at the version that is linked, presently. 85 or 90% of what is being provided to you now is substantively and largely exactly the same as that, but I did make some changes. So I'd like to go through the document, one, so those are brought to your attention, and two, because there's some things that you might decide that were actually in the original draft that you might not, want, or you might want to change, or you might want to think about changing because we present it today and then you've got time to think about it before adoption. That provides an opportunity to wake up at 2 o'clock in the morning and say, hey, I don't like that. I'm going to bring that, that issue up. So it's a little, I think it's safe to say that the goal of these bylaws were to include a lot of information that technically is typically outside the scope of what you would see in bylaws. Bylaws typically are a very specific document that address the governance of the board. It's one of the reasons it doesn't have to go out for public comment. It is the board's rules on how the board conducts itself and conducts its meetings. So there are arguably four documents that fed into the various drafts. One is the existing bylaws. Two is the Teton County Library meeting procedures that is in the giant library handbook, but frankly, is pretty apparent when you look at it, is generally not followed because it's the procedures outlined for the board meetings in that document are pretty formal. And in a Robert's Rules perspective, and then the board officer descriptions document, and then there's a fourth document that bears some interest, some relevance to what this document I think is trying to do, which is the Teton County Board Member Expectations Form that all volunteer board members are asked to sign about their expectations about attendance and participation. So I talked to Kip this week and we threaded that. I threaded that in a little bit. He has not seen this document yet either, mostly because I was still tinkering with it at 2 o'clock in the morning.
Abby, what was the third one? I got the other.
Oh, so the bylaws, the meeting procedures, the board member officer descriptions, and then the Teton County Board Member Expectations, which is the document. When you're all first appointed to the board, you go over to the county administrative building, and this is one of the documents that you sign over there. And I'd actually never seen it before, so I obtained a copy to take a look at. Some other things that actually were threaded into the drafts on this are some additional statements that Kip incorporated on ethics for library board members that are a little more specific for libraries than, just any board.
Those come from the American Library
The American Library
Association.
Association. I didn't tinker with those except for formatting. And then a couple of the resolutions the library board adopted, this board, I believe, on both of them, on intellectual freedom, that I think there was a consensus among the board that you'd like to see that in your bylaws. And maybe in part just because of the bylaws would act to some extent as a cheat sheet, where as much as the information that you need is in one document instead of, this binder in front of me, which is your library handbook, which, so, when I first reviewed it, I was a little sort of, okay, this is way more than bylaws, but if this is the direction that the board wants, I played with some of the language to make some of the things, for lack of a better word, more boardy. So to the extent that this is supposed to be telling the board how to do its job, language just tweaked, so it's a little more focused on the board than say, you know, the library itself. Let's see, so you'll see there are a few things I removed, you know, such as there was a paragraph about, you know, members taking an oath of office. And you don't, you sign the expectation form of the county. There are a few things where it sort of had language about what the Board of County Commissioners do, not just what they do, but saying they will do X. Well, that's not really within this board's purview to say the Board of County Commissioners will do X, for example, hold a hearing for removal of a board member for cause. You can't really tell them what to do. I understand the intent. So just there were some pretty mostly minor changes. The last thing is, especially I think since April was a voucher meeting. When I realized this was coming on the board agenda today, and the aim is to adopt it before the turnover in July, as usual. The present bylaws require the new bylaws to be presented, and then you sit on them for 30 days before you can adopt them. And that, I think we've talked about when we did the amendment before, is sort of a, just so everyone can think about it. It's not a hard and fast rule, like if the Administrative Procedures Act where it has to go out for notice. So unfortunately, the 30 days from today is 2 days after your June meeting. So, but what we're gonna do is have a special meeting. So the 30th day, your board meeting is Thursday, the 30th day is Saturday, and sometime in like Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, just have a quick special meeting to adopt. So they'll be on the books before July 1st.
And I believe.
And one of the changes to the bylaws presented to you today is that instead of 30 days, changes have to be presented and then can be adopted at the next meeting. Because we just keep running into that 30-day thing being a problem. So let's see, how are we doing on time? Okay.
And everybody should have a copy in your email now.
Okay,
Is there, Abigail, quick question, is there any, that 30-day period, is there any kind of statutory reason for that, or just
no.
arbitrary?
We just, it's you know, a lot of things, we have things that are clearly defined in the law. Well, I shouldn't say clearly defined, because when you read the statutes, you rarely come to the conclusion that it's clear, but and then we have and that, and especially in Wyoming, tends to be a pretty low bar on a lot of things. And then we have what we call best practices. So, I mean, frankly, the Historic Preservation Board, their bylaws, they can change their bylaws in a meeting, right? They can say, today, we're gonna adopt these bylaws or change this, but that's really frowned upon because it allows board members to respond to things more, you know, more emotionally or without thinking it through. So the recommendation to have either 30 days or the next meeting is to just to provide a period of time for contemplation, right? So, and for ideas to trickle to the surface where you realize that, and avoid sudden decisions. In the heat of the moment. So
my one concern with that would be that, exactly as you say, that you know, if something wanted to be kind of railroaded through, that a meeting could be called, you know, immediately after, right, or very soon thereafter. Does it make sense to say after a minimum period of like a week or 10 days?
I actually thought of that when I was drafting, so that's certainly, and I did not put it in, but I thought about the next regular meeting, and I didn't want to say regular because that limits you to regular, especially since you guys now have voucher meetings when nothing else can be done. But I can certainly, when we get to that, let's talk about how the rest of the board feels. That's exactly why I wanted to really have you guys look at these and talk about them in the board meeting. And we can add like 2 weeks or something, the next regular meeting or 2 weeks, whichever, something that avoids that, especially since special meetings may be called by, with only 8 hours notice. So,
Okay.
okay. What
Thank you.
I'm proposing is that we just take a look, I tried to address the formatting, but if you take a look at the footer, clearly that something went wonky with that, but since it went from the Word document, went from like the library to my office and a Mac to my home on a PC, sometimes things happen, but this is just a draft and it would probably like to get formatted by the staff to look consistent font wise and everything with, all the other documents that we've been working on this last year. The policy, so what I'm proposing is we sort of take a minute and allow everyone to read like the first couple of articles, and then once everyone has, I'll see if there are any questions and point out anything that I want to point out to you, so right off the bat, why don't just everyone take a minute, please, and read Article 1, 2, 3, and 4 on page 1.
Is there there's no track changes, right? So
No, I attempted to do that and it just, I was making so many changes and formatting changes. It was just making it really difficult. If you would like, following the meeting, I could probably do a merge comparison document with the one. I can also walk you through pretty much what I did. I mean, if you'd like. So Article 1, organization, is just identifying the organization that the bylaws are drafted for, which is the Teton County Board of Directors, and then it just mentions the statute that, under which the board is formed. Article 2, I tweaked because it had name and location, which was the name and location of the library. But these bylaws are about the board, not the library. I know it's a subtle, maybe esoteric difference, but so you can see an A and B there that I just sort of used that article to identify the library, you know, not as, and also identify the library's locations. So that's the only change I made to Article 2. I'm gonna give everyone a minute to maybe read through, these aren't long. Just page 1. Have a secret signal.
Abigail, I wondered if there, with that establishment of location, with that pilot study we have going out at Calico Pizza, do we need any wording that would be inclusive of those sorts of opportunities?
I don't think we want to put that in the bylaws right now. It's not technically a branch. I think we just, it's just a pilot project, so until that gets made official. And it can be can be terminated at any time, so I really wouldn't want that. I wouldn't recommend listing that here. I was thinking we could add a sentence saying, satellite, but I mean, and then you could add the little book notes. I mean, you could add a lot of things here, so I think it should stay focused on the main facilities. So. I consider that part of the library system. So to the extent it says the Teton County Library is the public library and library system established in Teton County Library, I would have that just be one aspect of the library system, which includes online services and not, even though it is a physical location, not specifically listed in B because it doesn't rise to the level of the branches.
Could you just state that the administrative offices are located there? Like that it's managed from that location primarily?
Well, I think the fact that for what, the main library?
For the whole system.
I'm not following, just the,
Rather than making, expressing where all of the branches are, just stating that, the central location or the primary location, I guess is what I'm saying.
I think that the physical location of the two branches is significant enough to warrant a specific mention of, where they are and, in the community. So, but if the board wants to tweak this, I certainly, we can. So, that moves us but to the Article 3, which identifies the library service area. You'll see the original draft called it a service district, which might be like a term of art in library fields, or came from another bylaw, communities bylaws we were using. But it was never really defined, and it's not a term lay people understand, so I just referred it to identifying the service area. And so I guess what I do, I just tweak the language there that, about the services being provided within Teton County. And then I added here language right out of the statute that the library is intended to be free to all residents, and then on the condition that such persons comply with the rules and regs prescribed by the board. That's just another one of those things that comes up sometimes that I think is part of having this be the cheat sheet for the board of what their role and their responsibilities are. So I did add that. And then, the library mission statement, all I did there is formatting. So, any other questions or? Okay, board.
I said, I think your mission statement is.
That, yeah, the We Enrich Lives, that was on the draft I had, but
I think
that's
the
certainly.
draft, it probably needs to be changed.
Oh, why?
I think
You know
that
why?
when the
Because
draft
this
was written,
draft
we're
was
still
written
in draft.
January. Yeah, so no, that's a good catch. Thank you. So we'll plan, does everyone support changing the mission statement to be the current mission statement?
Yes.
All right. I know we've had discussions about the first 3 articles. Is there are people satisfied with what it is, or do you want to make some of the changes? All right, we can also have, if people decide they really think it's appropriate, they can bring it up again at the next meeting before adoption, and we can tweak it and then have in the meeting and then adopt. Adopt with changes, we can have the meeting for adoption. If there are any other additional changes, it will say, well, adoption with the changes as discussed in the meeting, right? And that will be incorporated. So, Article 5 on board membership that I think is pretty close to, what's in the existing bylaws. And is in the draft that was linked. So.
I have a question about B
Yeah.
and the phrase "who are representative of the entire county."
Mhm.
Is that getting at geographic aspects of the county or like cultural or?
That is right out of the statute.
Because I don't know what that means or how
Right.
what's the metric there? And if we want a metric, then it should be better defined.
Should, but it's, first, even though it's here, it is ultimately the county commissioners who make that evaluation when selecting board members to make sure that they're quote representative of the entire county. I think it can mean whatever, you want it to mean, and that's kind of okay. But it is exactly out of the statute. I could add the statutory reference. And that way, board members looking at this, it might, make it clearer that language wasn't language you came up with, or even the commissioners came up with. It's right out of the statute.
And it might be feedback for the commission, even in advance of their interviews, that
Right.
especially with their DEI initiatives, they
Yeah.
should be looking at their own language to say, does that mean anything? And what does it mean in 2023?
Yeah, let's see if I have living bylaws. I mean, I'm fairly comfortable. I can give you the citation, but I'm pretty comfortable that that's right out of the
No, I
Wyoming
just-
statutes creating the board.
Yeah,
I haven't known to be wrong. And of course, the statute, I don't think the library statutes, enabling statutes to create the library have been tinkered with, so the statute's probably extremely old. Um. Just give me 1 second. Yeah, so it's in, 18-7-103, the county library board of directors shall be appointed by the county commissioners. Shall be composed of not less than 3, not more than 5 competent and responsible residents who are representative of the entire community.
oh, entire community, not county.
Oh, yeah, so we can change that since. I mean, they count, if you prefer the statutory language, which is probably not a bad idea.
Yeah, I change it.
All right, does everyone else support that?
Yeah.
Okay. Let's see, not less than 5 competent and responsible residents. Oh, no, sorry, I'm sorry, it does say, statute says county.
Okay.
Sorry. My glasses, okay. Okay, so that, any other questions about Article 5 on board membership? Article 6 is just term of office for the board, so I'll give everyone a second. But I did take out, since you did, I didn't realize everyone had seen this. The language on the removal of the board members and that the county commissioners shall hold a hearing, that's what I took out because you can't really tell them what to do. And so. And I believe, so this, is all pretty consistent with, except for that with, the previous draft, as well as you're very consistent with the existing bylaws. And statutes. So, okay, is everyone good with term of office? And that's not to say you can't review this later and decide to bring something up in the next month. So again, all right, so officers, it's just, this is exactly the same, chair, vice chair, secretary, treasurer, terms of 1 year at the July meeting. And then this is where probably people want to take some time. Right now, I don't think I tweaked a few things, and just tightened up language on the roles of the chair. So, I changed shall authorize calls for special meetings. I think I took that out. Because even though later in the document on special meetings, it says that special meetings can be called by either the chair or 2 board members. So I took that out here, but, because it's different and appears in another section. Let's see. All right, so any tweaks or questions about the role of the chair?
I just need another secretary.
Oh, okay, okay. I did tweet, vice chair is the same, secretary, I did add some language, just emphasizing a little more the secretary's role in, if not actively taking the minutes, making sure that they're done, that they're accurate, that they're organized, that, and just playing some level of, if not actively doing a lot of the administrative work with the supportive staff, making sure they're actively playing a role, sort of providing some oversight to those documents. I did remove the language that the secretary had to sign every single thing because it just said they can sign when their signature is necessary to a text.
What happens with minutes from executive session?
We'll see that again later. I actually added a lot to the executive session, but technically, and it's in here, so again, this becomes the cheat sheet, sort of remind people that minutes are required to be kept for executive sessions, and then they have to be bifurcated from the other minutes of the meeting because they're to be kept confidential, except for on a court order. So that's something we probably need to be more mindful of going forward, is to make sure, you know, who's preparing those, where they are kept.
They are kept at the clerk's office.
With Maureen?
Yeah,
Okay.
Yeah.
That like a hard, like, is it a written copy or the video?
I know
Or,
that Dale kept them, she would take them over to Mo.
okay, all right, we might want to just.
And is it not? I'm used to once the matter is covered in the executive session is resolved, that the minutes become public. Is that not the case in Wyoming?
No, it is, and actually, that's not, crystal clear in here, so I might want to add a sentence. Well, actually, when we get to executive session, we'll talk about that, which I know we're running out of time, so, treasurer, let's see, everyone just takes a minute to read that. I think I did add language here that I think is in the existing bylaws that emphasized a bit more the treasurer's role in checking, you know, the voucher payments for both accuracy and accountability. And the library board was created in the statutes in a manner that's a little different than other voluntary boards. You have the additional autonomy. But the fiduciary duties over the library fund, the money set aside by the county for the library is one of the bigger roles of the board that is the reason for its having more autonomy than other boards. And so I just added a few words to sort of maybe emphasize that a bit more. So I think I also added the treasurers, shall monitor the budget throughout the year. Now arguably, other that doesn't preclude other board members also from providing some level of oversight, but to the extent that the officer roles do have some lanes for people to be in. Okay, anything jumping out at anyone? I don't want to rush since I'm the one who wanted to go through this paragraph by paragraph, but I'm also sensitive to you have something coming up at 10:30.
Christina know that we might be.
Oh, okay. The committee language, I think, is pretty much the same as what you've seen. I tweaked it, but not on substance, mostly on eliminating some repetition. So, there can be committees established. no more than 2 members of the library board, can be on a committee. Committees don't have the authority to make final decisions, only recommendations. And I do have, and I think this was in the original, that the chair appoints both the members of committees as well as the chair of a committee, but with approval of the full board. So, but that could be tweaked if something else is appropriate. Is everyone kind of good with that for now? Okay. Board meetings, which is the next article. This really is just basically the rule, the Wyoming statutes, a lot of it on public meetings. So paragraph A is just emphasizing with statutory references that, you know, action of the board, and I did add additional language, I think, right out of the statute to this. Sometimes paraphrasing if the statute was too wonky, the language, but just to emphasize to the board members that, you know, business of the board is public business that must occur in public unless it follows within one of the exceptions for under 405 for executive sections. Notice is just to emphasize the fact that, you know, those public meetings have to be properly noticed or any, and I added language from the statute that says that any action taken without, well, actually, this is an A, not B, but without proper notice is void. So that way, that's a little more front and center in front of everyone to make sure they're that's and always maybe a little further up in their mind. The regular meetings, paragraph C is basically the exact language from the amendment we did this past year about instead of the bylaws saying meetings will be every third Thursday at 8:30. That's the default rule, but it allows the resolution at the beginning of the fiscal year to set the calendar so you can avoid holidays. When people know in advance that they're not going to be around, you know, they can change those dates. So that's pretty much the same as what we did. Then this is just right out of the statutes, the requirements for having a special meeting. Yes.
Our July meeting then will be at 8:30, correct?
Oh, you're right.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay.
So we can change it to 9 right now. Do you want to change it to 9?
Yeah.
Or for the people who might still be on the board? Yes,
Yeah.
all right, let's change that. That's in the so I noticed that too, when I put, I'm like, wow, okay, we'll change that to 9. The only difference between the statutes, and this is in your existing bylaws for special meetings, I think under the statute, only the chair can call a special meeting, but your current bylaws allow the chair or a majority of the board. But then the draft that was given to me to review actually had at least 2 other board members, which is technically less than a majority, but so that's up to the board if you're comfortable with that. So it's either the chair or at least 2 other board members. 8 hours of notice, you know, the notice has to have date, time, place, and a statement of the special business. And then the really key part of special meetings always is if the notice, which is typically the agenda, it doesn't needs to say everything that needs to be addressed at the special meeting because you can't go outside the scope of the special meeting, what was in the notice. A regular meeting, you can talk about whatever you want in those meetings technically under the statute. It might have an agenda, but you can introduce new topics under matters from the board or staff. It might come up in public comment. The board might decide if it was brought up out of the blue to talk about it then and there. You can't do any of that in a special meeting. So I added that to this to, again, to keep it, you know, in people's minds with the cheat sheet idea of the bylaws. Same thing, emergency meetings, just the rules. Let's see, the recording of the proceedings, because there are, you know, required to keep minutes. So this is just, emphasizing that that's the role of both the board and the secretary or designee is to make sure they keep, minutes and, they're available to the public. And I basically put, as you guys decide how to disseminate that, the rules for quorums. And then here, I think the quorum, within your existing rules, hold on. And then this is where. All right, this is like rearranged stuff. So you did add the current draft, one of the drafts executive session, and I think I just sort of added to this. So I put in, that you can hold executive sessions not open to the public in limited enumerated circumstances as set forth in the statute. That you can only hold it after a majority vote to hold the session, and the motion must specify the reason for the session out of the enumerated list, whether it's employment or real estate or any of the things in that list. Just to remind people that the motion needs to say that, not just I move we go into executive session. And then that here's where I added, I think, it might have been there, that the minutes have to be kept and kept confidential. And then I added actually that the part that does not have to be kept confidential is if a board member objects to executive session because they don't think it actually falls within one of the exceptions for a public meeting of executive session. So, and there might, if that were ever to happen, there's a little more to that, but I didn't want to clutter all of, the bylaws with all of that, sort of flag it by including it here. Meeting procedures. So typically, meeting procedures, they touch and concern the rights of the public because it's when they have an opportunity to speak and whatnot, and the order of things. And a lot of meetings, I don't know if your current meeting procedures were actually adopted under the Administrative Procedures Act, because I think they've been in the binder for a very long time that predates all of us probably. And so typically I just tweak the language to make it more that the meeting procedures is the role, is the sort of duty and role of the chair. So instead of being like, we adopted your policies and procedures that affect the public because you could take people's rights away, right? So they have to be adopted under the APA and they have an opportunity for a hearing if they feel their rights are violated. So I tweaked some of this language to make it clear that this isn't like a rule that could violate someone's rights. It's more guidance for the board, for the chair on what the board, by adopting these bylaws, the expectation is for managing the meetings. So, it says agendas prepared shall include, but are not limited to the following items, which may be presented in the following suggested sequence. Because we wanted structure, but not like a hard and fast rule. We have to do it this way. So actually, let me just give you guys a minute to maybe look over that language for the chair for A. I tweaked the names of the agenda items a little bit to make it a little clearer what was supposed to happen at that moment in time.
And just quickly, in the interest of time, Kip, what I overheard you saying we've got a little bit of room to slip, but
I did email Christina and told her that we may be a few minutes late, and she said that is okay. I assume we'll all want a short break too. We also have to have another Zoom link for that meeting, for that training, so.
Okay.
Maybe go until about maybe 25 till. Because we also have to.
Yeah, it might be faster if I just be quiet and maybe one of you guys be like everything on page up to D. Rules, and let me know if there are any questions on page 6 of B, C, and D.
I mean, I'm just gonna say we don't follow those rules, but they're fine in there.
Well, notice the last line on B.
Yeah,
So I was actually gonna move that same language down to D on rules of parliamentary practices, so it appears twice that the chair can relax the formality. And you do the motions and voting and C, you actually do that, you just don't do it in a super formal fashion. The key is that the minutes really should reflect who's making the motion, who's seconding, and who's voting which way, which has not been hard because you guys have been unanimous on every single decision pretty much. So this is sort of, it allows the chair to loosen the rules when it's warranted, like with a board such as your present board, but also allows the chair to tighten it up when it's different.
Under A, number 11, is that any affiliate, does affiliated organization just mean friends and foundation?
Yeah, and I don't think we need to say more than
That's
that.
fine.
Maybe library affiliated.
That's what I guess I was wondering,
Yeah.
just to clarify. this.
So, yeah, all right, I'll add the word library to that. And then And actually, you guys can roll right in unless someone wants to raise another question into reading on the public attendance and participation. There was some language in the draft about like not letting people speak and some pretty sort of, for lack of, pretty strong rules that I thought were either not appropriate or legal. I just tried to sort of rephrase some of them and draft something that was a little more workable. And the paragraph, Kip and I talked about this, there was a paragraph in the draft, you guys saw the original draft about being able to prohibit people from recording you when you're in a public meeting, and you can't do that. So,
And it's also fine to vote.
and the public attendance as well.
That's very,
Okay. Yeah.
Do we need to make any clarification on there for virtual public attendance, or is that sort of implied?
I think it's implied. I don't think we want to say anything because right now your agendas say as they should, they're required to say, and you're required to say in your resolution when the time, place, and location. That is required in the statutes. It's one of the reasons, and it's one of the things I've noticed with a lot of boards is sometimes their agendas, they forget to put all that on the top because they figure everybody knows. But, you need to assume not everybody knows. And for the extent that the location on all the agendas and in the resolution adopting the meeting, and then for a special meeting says will be at the library and available by Zoom. So I don't want to put Zoom in here, because what if something, you decided you wanted to have a meeting that was not gonna be on Zoom, so I think it's better to allow it just to be.
This meeting is both in person and virtual, and then our following work session is just in this room.
Right.
Minor editing note under J in the second sentence, it says in the twice.
Okay.
And then I was wondering this, is there I've always thought that there was a deadline that, materials had to be available to the public before a certain, amount of time. Is that?
That's our courtesy. I believe the agenda is the only thing that is
Yeah.
actually required by statute.
That is
Okay.
true. And I would leave that flexible. I mean, it's a best practice that I'm not helping for anything with getting things up in advance like today, but, I would keep that open and just have that be a goal. Because again, technically for regular meetings, you're not even required to have an agenda. People just know that the business of the library board is done at its regular meetings according to that schedule. If you want to know what's going on, you show up. So an agenda is again, a best practice that goes above and beyond, but it's not required. And then the linking of the documents on is also not technically required. That actually is, I think, it might be in your procedures, your meeting procedures, that, was in your giant book, I think has something in there. What might be appropriate though is to put language in saying that you strive to, but that's something that, depending on how strong you feel about it.
Seems like if you take two, while it may be appropriate, it might not be, or it may be, what's the word I'm looking for? Legal, it's not exactly
Yeah.
best practice. I don't know. I mean, I wouldn't want to nail anybody down. Like I was saying earlier, a lot of this we follow pretty liberally, but it is, I always think of these things as keeping you out of getting into trouble. I just think you could get in a real trouble if you don't put out an agenda. I don't know. I avoid it.
If you made it arguably a requirement or made it look like a requirement, and then if you didn't do it,
Yeah.
someone was upset, then that's one of the grounds for saying that you didn't follow your rules or didn't do it right. Where if you don't have a rule on it, well, then, it's a little safer.
Yeah, no, I get that. And,
So,
I'm scarred. I have battle scars from previous interactions. So
yeah, so I think, and it's this board is adopting these bylaws, it's your call. Clearly, a board in the past wanted much stricter rules, because this thing in your handbook, which I'm not even sure, when it was adopted, or if it was just like handed out and everyone's like, okay, we'll do this, right? But today, or next month, you are saying these are your rules, right? So if you wanted it, you can add it, but I sort of judging from the drafts and, this board's, I didn't think that you would want a hard and fast rule on that, so. Or anything that could be interpreted as a hard and fast rule. Again, these are the bylaws, so technically a member of the public wouldn't necessarily be able to say like, well, my rights were violated because you didn't follow a rule, when the rule's written for you, for yourselves, not to benefit the public. But a key element of any public complaint about a governing body is that you didn't follow your own rules, right? So if there isn't a rule, you can't be accused of not following it.
Yeah, I don't wanna make it more stressful for
Yeah,
Kip in particular.
yeah,
So I just
Well-
think, sure, we could strive and we could even put strive, I'd be fine with that, but we don't. need to
I don't
either.
think you need to, I mean, you just say that as a board, like, we really want
You
this.
can set that as an expectation of us to do that.
You could yell at us more.
That'd be fine.
Yeah, and then, but, some of the things, especially with them so often, and it's gotten a lot better, definitely, but sometimes the financial reports are held up at the county
Right.
level or the
That's
bookkeeper level, so a bit more flexibility. There are also things like, you'll notice if you look at the commissioners' agendas, certain things like workshops, sometimes they publicly post the PowerPoint that the staff does in a workshop, and sometimes they don't. There's no rule about it, and since there's no rule, no one can really object.
Yeah.
So. Okay, the next after, so did anyone have anything about the public comment section? The public attendance and participation, which again, I think I wrote it, I did put some rules here that, you must provide an opportunity for public comment on each agenda item as well as generally. So that is something where I was a little more strict. I think I'm the one who bumped up that language. But then I also put guidance, but again, I sort of couched it. You'll see throughout this whole section E as, this is what the chair should do. So it's not a rule like a meeting procedure that the public must follow these rules, right? It's not a hard and fast rule for the public. It's the chair's role and what the chair attempts to do in controlling the room, which obviously right now is not an issue for you guys, right? Because you don't have members of the public at your meeting until the day you do. And then usually it's so. So I tried to strike a balance there. And again, because I emphasize the chair so much in at least the second half of this, the chair's at liberty to relax these rules, and I don't even think you need to say that. It's sort of the prerogative of the chair implicitly. So because, on the few times where you've had public comment, there wasn't this level of formality. And even this isn't as formal as it's done in some meetings. So I wanted to allow a framework that could be more formal. That's used in like the commissioner meetings where people are to direct their comments at the chair and not to other people in the audience or other board members or anything like that. But obviously it's not going to be the direction of this board most of the time, although it's also going to depend on who your chair is, right? Just like an HOA, you get a new HOA president, things can change really fast. So, and then I have the further procedures I added, so the library board may elect to adopt additional meeting procedures. I sort of have that in there as a hint that if you did want some hard and fast rules about how meetings are conducted and how both for the board as well as the public, that we could do that but formalize it through the APA, the 45 days of notice and public comment. So that's just sort of a flag there that could be done. So board duties and responsibilities is just sort of a list based on both the statutes as well, mostly the statutes, but also some internal things that either Kip put in here or board members put in the original draft. So ultimately a big purpose of the board, right off the bat, is that you're in charge of the library funds, okay? And then your participation in the library budget. Now that the library budget is part of, a little more formalized with the county budget, well, that's been the case for years. The audit, the library asset paragraph is right out of the statutes. Differs a little bit from funds because it also means you're responsible for, property and real estate. That this board is who hires the directory of library services, who hires staff with approval of the board. And then that's all out of the statutes. And then, G is also that the library board and statutes prescribes the policy, rules, and regulations for use of the library. The uniformly applied throughout the county library something is something that staff added.
F, Director of Library Service and Library Staff. I think the library board, that sounds like we approve the actual person that KIP hires, which I don't think is right. We do, as I recall, the board approves the creation of positions and then the salary range, but I'm not.
Yeah, that's correct.
We
You're
don't
right.
approve the actual individual.
That might be the practice, but
I think that's what the statute does say, but
says
you
your
give me the
interpretation of-
authority to
right.
do that, and I don't know how you might want to word that, or with the.
Yeah, because we wouldn't want a board member and it is the language in the
It is
statute,
the
but maybe what we want to, all right,
I have seen some.
so is
points.
everyone else comfortable?
I don't understand the distinction.
Yeah.
What are we looking at? Number
F, Director of Library Services and Library Staff. The statute says the board selects, a librarian,
Right.
and that the librarian will appoint library staff with approval of the
Oh,
library
I see. Yeah,
director.
no,
So
I
what
think
does
fine.
that mean?
I have seen language that
Would-
was sent to you.
Clarifying that.
Yeah, would you like that to be refined for not just the statute, but the actual practice of approving positions, but not necessarily the individual? Because that sort of invites maybe micromanaging your director.
Someone could be thinking about worst case scenario. I just think that could get you into a little bit of a pickle.
Is everyone else supportive of tweaking that a little bit? And I'll,
Yes.
Yes.
send around some language. Okay. Kip and I
You would
will
also
work
hold up.
on that.
It's a lot.
Right.
Let's see, this is just, you guys create the rules for the library. I took out the one line that says that have to be adopted under the Administrative Procedures Act. Because some of your policies do have to be adopted under the APA, but some of them don't, and I didn't want to have a mandate in there. I mean, if it's a rule that affects the public's rights, then it has to, but we didn't need to say that. This, I believe, sort of staff added to the review of the rules, where there's sort of a duty within the bylaw to, sort of take a fresh look at those periodically, given changing times in the community and the technology. Reporting, this is where I moved it, but this was in the draft you all saw. So this is just that the board will provide regular and, annual report to the commissioners, which I think is required. And then it says may provide additional quarterly or periodic reporting to the board of county commissioners. That's being done right now, but I don't know if you necessarily want a hard and fast rule about that. And then this is where I added the library board shall notify the board of county commissioners if a board member ceases to be a resident of Teton County or misses more than 3 regular meetings during a 12-month period without approval by the library board. if actually you should probably on that one, to make sure you're all okay with that, read J, which is the bylaw on attendance and participation at board meetings, which basically, said that if you're not gonna be there, you need to be excused by the, chair. So actually, but this last sentence on the recording suggests that, if you miss more than 3 regular meetings without approval of the full board, the board's supposed to notify the commissioners. So I think this was an attempt to have something sort of flagged in writing about if you've got a board member who is doing, the two, in the statutes, the 2 grounds for removal of a board member by the commissioners is neglect of duty or misconduct. So clearly this was written in to address if there's a feeling by the rest of the board that there's a neglect of duty that warrants the commissioner's intervention.
Can I ask a question about the first sentence in
Yeah.
I? Who does that? When was the last time you did that? Is that Peter's job, and what's in that annual report? I know he's doing it quarterly, but say in the future, whoever's the next board chair doesn't want to do it
Yeah,
quarterly.
that's why I put May on the quarterly, but the annual, I thought there was a requirement, but I'd also think it might have gone away since we got integrated, you got integrated with the county.
We still do an annual report of some sort.
What part of the year do you do that?
We had been doing it in December. It's now moving to the end of the fiscal year.
Okay, so it's a look back.
Yeah,
Does the county require?
not that no one's ever asked for one.
Okay, so we could make all of that discretionary, but it's probably a good idea to have a mandatory annual report once a year to the commissioners, but then the more frequent quarterly or other, have it be discretionary.
And Kip, you draft that, or you and Peter have? Has Peter drafted those reports?
It's a work in, it's a changing process. It was a joint foundation library report, it should not be that. So last year we just sort of did a year in review as advertisements in the paper. And I know we still have to figure out what we're doing this year.
Okay.
But the commissioners, I think, established they wanted it to report once or twice a year from boards. We wanted to keep it quarterly, so we still go quarterly.
And yeah, this is probably, I think everything else after this is an important one. Everything else after this, I think we can sort of skim. But, okay, so right now, if you look at I and J combined, so board members are required to attend board meetings. That's in the current bylaws. Although it says regularly attend. I don't know what regularly attend means. I mean, I think you should say that people are required to attend. In the event, oh, and this is where I have typos. A board member must be absent. They'll notify the chair. So they're not asking for permission, but they're notifying the chair. And I'll get to the next section in a minute. And then you go back to reporting. So you don't have to ask permission, obviously, because that wouldn't work. But if you miss more than 3 meetings during a 12-month period without approval of the library board. So you notify the chair in advance, you miss 3 meetings. Once it goes, you hit your 4th meeting, then you need to get approval of having missed the 4th meeting from the full board. Otherwise, missing the 4th meeting by this language triggers basically a requirement that the board notify the commissioners that this person missed more than 3 meetings without approval by the board, because there might be reason, right? The board, as long as you get 3, right? And then once you go over 3, you really need to communicate with your board. And this is the idea, like, it's up to you guys, but that's sort of the way it was drafted, and then I tweaked it. And so the one thing that could also be is, you can't have more than 3, miss more than 3 regular meetings during a 12-month period without approval of the chair instead of the full board. I don't know, so that's an optional piece there. So, you need to notify the chair to the extent possible in advance you're missing, but you don't need permission. 3, if you're not there, you're not there, but once you hit that number 4, the board's required to tell the commissioners. Is that something everyone wants? And that would sort of trigger for the commissioners that this person's neglecting their duty. It doesn't mean the commissioners are required to poll them, right? But maybe it'll get their attention. And there's also, they can also come to the board and say, I gotta go back east, or, I gotta go to rehab, or I'm gonna have a baby, or like, reasons to where the chair or the board is like, it's okay for you to miss 4 meetings or 5, but,
So the only way.
it's like
the
some
way it's-
accountability.
Yeah, the way it's worded now is
Yeah.
the only way we would go to the county is if a person missed 4 without getting permission from the chair
Or the board.
or the board.
I mean, right now it's written as the board, that 3, you don't need permission, but if you're gonna meet 4 and you don't get permission, that triggers a notification to the board of county commissioners.
Is approval by the board business? Like, is that an informal discussion, or does it? Which leads me to think that maybe just leaving it in the hands of the chair makes the most sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, that's exactly why I wanted this
I think
one
that
to
makes
talk
sense.
about, so we're gonna change this. So the chair will get to decide, whether or not they have permission. And actually, the other reason that might be appropriate is, and this happened with the town council, it would have been confidential, except it's all over the news, is when Councilman Rooks went away for a while for very personal, what perhaps should have been kept private reasons, although there's also an element where when you're in a public office, you don't have as much privacy. And he cleared it through the mayor, with the chair, but it didn't go according to their rules. I don't think it needed to, or maybe it did, I forget, through the rest of the board. And there was a board member who was not happy and made a huge issue out of that council person's absence. But in that circumstance, that's the nice thing about the chairs, there's a level of privacy. So the board's basically giving the chair the discretion to know what the reason is and not necessarily share it with the rest of the board. Right, so, all right, so we'll change that to chair, okay.
I
And
wonder, given that we only have 9 meetings, if the threshold should be slightly lower, that if you miss 2 and then the 3rd meeting, because that's, you're missing 4, you're basically missing half a year now.
Except that because you set your meetings now by resolution, it was 9 this year, it might not. You're gonna have a different board next year who might want to meet every month and not do what you've done now. You've had that flexibility, and your board member expectations says that you're expected to attend at least 75% of regularly scheduled and special meetings per calendar year. So if you go 75%, if you have 1 meeting a month is, you end up with a 3. So, but that could also play into, the discretion of the chair on whether or not it's excessive or not. And here's the other thing, it triggers a requirement. If the chair excuses it, then it doesn't trigger the requirement to notify the board, but just notifying the board could be so-and-so missed 4 board meetings, but we, the board, are comfortable with that, because there's reasons. I don't know, it doesn't, just because the notification goes, doesn't mean it can't be handled, amicably. Might not be, but once it hits that, but.
Seems like if the chair were to tell the board,
Yeah.
they'd be upset. Whereas if the chair would be upset, there'd be a reason, even though they're not the
Right.
action.
So,
I'd rather leave it to the chair to say, I understand in this situation. and we're still functioning, and this person's a valuable.
Well, here's another thing, instead of saying the library board shall notify the commissioners if,
Oh, yeah,
someone,
let's.
do you want that to be the chair as well?
You're giving a lot of power to one person.
See,
I-
yes, see
I
that?
just want like. I would be wary of this, like, what if the chair is really good friends with it? I don't know, like, maybe I think about the world in the worst
Yeah,
possible
yeah.
way.
You know?
But I just,
um,
like, one person being okay with someone being gone 4 times is a lot of, and I'm aware that there's discretion and I want to be sensitive to that, but I do wonder, it's a small board, you only have 5 people. When you take away one person on a regular basis, it put a lots of pressure on the other people.
Yeah.
In some, right now, the board is working really well. In other areas, there have been times when it's been really contentious and missing one person is a big deal. Like, you know,
Well-
you have a bad director, Kip, not you, but if you did, this could become an issue. I'm just a little wary. I don't know what the right thing is. I just can kind of,
Okay.
Like,
What if,
Well, just keep in mind too, that it's, there's less of an excuse to miss meetings when you can appear via Zoom.
a quick thought on that? What if X number of absences triggered a discussion with the full board? Just to say, just to evaluate that and then say, okay, well, if it happens again, the full board would say, we need to report this to the commissioners. Or they could decide, oh yeah, you've had a health issue or a work issue, or this is excused.
If we change, instead of library board shall notify the commissioners, it could be say library board may notify the commissioners if a board member ceases to be a resident or misses more than 3 regular meetings during a 12-month period without approval of the chair. That still gives the chair the authority to give them as many passes as they want if they're buddies. We could also bifurcate those somehow, where the chair somehow has an ability to give the pass, but if it reaches a certain level, the board can step in if they don't think the chair. But what if the chair's the problem? Actually.
Yeah, I mean, there potentially are two, you know, you could have a situation where the chair is close with the absentee board member. You could also have a situation where the chair maybe had something against that member. I think involving, you know, after a certain trigger, involving the full board to say, well, this is okay or it's not okay, maybe makes sense, but.
But then I think I would want some kind of rules about it, that it does have to be brought up and discussed and voted on. It seems
Yeah,
like even just the language, the library board shall notify, it's like
Yeah.
5 people, we all go or.
well, no,
how does that-
I would envision a vote. And then a vote saying, well, I mean, first of all, shall doesn't allow you discretion, right? If they miss 3 meetings, the board's sort of obligated. So the chair could maybe do it on their own without a vote, but I also envision maybe a vote. If there are 3 unexcused absences, then the chair can then decide whether or not, you know, or as grounds. 3 unexcused absences by the chair is grounds for the board to consider whether or not to send a notice to the Board of County Commissioners. How's that sound? Something.
I like that.
Yeah, that way the chair still excuses the absences, but even whether or not they do that, 3 triggers the board having a vote where the full board has to decide whether, you know, has the option to vote. And could even, you know, to send it to the commissioners as an issue, which could even, you know, doesn't necessarily have to trigger like, we want this person removed. It could be a mechanism to get someone to behave. You send the letter to the board saying, hey, FYI, this person missed 4 meetings, period. Like, you're not asking the board to act, although you could say it's really impeding us. And we think there's grounds for removal for failure to, what's the word in the, you see what I mean? So
Yeah.
just something along those lines. All right, why don't I'll take a stab at that language. I don't, just like the full board, are you comfortable waiting to see it next month, and maybe I could just work with Lisa on some proposed language?
Yeah,
I think
I might
that's-
ask Peter's opinion too, since he's missing today. He might
Yeah.
have some good language, given his experience.
So that wouldn't be a forum if I go to Lisa and Peter to tweak this. Working with, staff, and then whatever we come up with will be in front of you. In advance of the special meeting of our adoption, so if anyone wants to bring anything up, there's an opportunity to change it in the meeting again. And have further discussion, okay. All right, we're gonna go Peter and.
What's the date again of the special meeting?
Well, we don't have one, but the meeting's Thursday, I think the 8th, the 16th or
16th or 18th.
whatever your June meeting, I think is Thursday the 16th, the 30 days is Saturday, so anytime after that, we have the following.
Okay.
And I wouldn't, it would only be to do this, so it shouldn't have to be very long.
Yes, because of that.
So is everyone okay with, saying you must notify the chair or presiding officer as soon as possible if you're gonna miss a meeting, right? Which is important, because otherwise, what if there's no quorum? You're gonna waste everyone's time. In-person attendance and participation is expected and encouraged. You may attend via telephone or video conference if approved by the chair or, whoever's presiding, as long as you can fully participate. Are people comfortable with that? So the discretion of the chair.
So it sounds like you need approval from the chair to attend by Zoom, which I've never done.
Yeah,
I don't know if people want that.
well, we
I
can
mean,
just take.
the
if approved
as a
by the
matter of, the seated chair could just say, make a blanket pronouncement that if you want to attend by Zoom, that's fine.
Right. But
So,
what if the chair who doesn't? And, we do, the county is.
This is the
encourage people.
expectation of the county commissioners.
They,
That language here is.
I believe, and actually, I think it might be in, hold on.
Does that predate Zoom though? When people were like, can I call in? And it was hard. I mean, Zoom is actually really functional.
It is, but I know, and I'm not sure, but Keith has told me, and he's been telling boards that they're really encouraging people. Still use Zoom, right? It's a great tool, but they've been really pushing for people to have in-person meetings. And there might be, the planning commission is meeting in person, but there's one member of the planning commission who is permanently on Zoom for health reasons or just her comfort level. And it's you're here with Al, and just the nature of this particular board this year, it's worked really well, but I've seen it not work. Like, you at least put your faces up. Some people don't put their faces up, and then they're trying to get the attention of the chair to say something. And they can't, and you can't read body language, and so it's still well within the discretion of the board to have a lot of Zoom participation by board. But so why doesn't everyone just think about that, and we'll see if anyone brings that up. Capital reserve fund is just what the rule on that is now that that's a thing. Here's where I added and county expectations. I just incorporated this by reference. It also allows for this to change because they might tweak it from year to year. Director of Library Services, I didn't change a thing on this. I don't think I changed a thing on conflicts of interest. I just separated it out into paragraphs. statement concerning intellectual freedom that the board adopted by resolution being incorporated into bylaws is just something this board wanted to do to keep it sort of front and center instead of resolutions that get buried in the dust when there are multiple ones. And then the Kip had added the library board ethics statement, which I think everyone has seen, and I didn't change anything in that. And then amendments, which of course I changed to majority vote of the board must be presented at a regular meeting and may not be acted upon. So it could presented at a regular, but it can be adopted as special. That leaves that open to, and can't be acted on or adopted until at least the next meeting of the board held following the initial presentation. So we can change that to regular, but then it precludes, like, if your schedule's weird, then you can't adopt because you can't adopt in special. So we can change that. I can tweak that so it's at the, next regular or special meeting held for that purpose, but not to, a special meeting can't occur, not to occur in less than 14 days or something. So, all right, I can add that in.
And just so I understand, the voucher meetings can't include anything else.
That was put in at the request of a board member that is no longer on the board, when we turned everything over. But if you ever had a voucher meeting scheduled, so people had to show up at least to sign vouchers, and you wanted to attend to other business, same date and time, all you need to do is say, oh my God, we need to sign this contract. We have a voucher meeting, notice a special meeting to occur at the same time as the voucher meeting, and then you can take care of the business at the same date and time. So
Just requires an additional
Yeah,
notice.
yeah. We had a huge debate about whether or not voucher meetings should be open to other things. The commissioners, when they originally created voucher meetings, it was only supposed to be for vouchers. Clearly it evolved into more. And then it became things like workshops where they don't take action, but they also do make exceptions to that when it's necessary. So, we're trying to have some members on that. And I think, are we good? Yes?
Yes, we need to do the library vouchers real quick. Sean.
Yes.
One final note, I did notice board is spelled BOAR sometimes, so you might want to do a search on that.
Any other typos anyone notices, feel free. We'll go through more carefully.
Yeah.
And that'll be fixed, but if anyone flags anything, you can send me an email.
Thanks a lot, Abigail. Good job.
All right.
Yeah,
Yes,
I
thank you,
apologize.
Abigail.
I apologize for it being literally
All right, then very quickly on to the payment of library vouchers. Lisa,
I move to approve the payment of library vouchers.
I will second that motion. Do we have any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor? Aye. Any opposed? All right, and so do I have a motion to adjourn?
I move that we adjourn this meeting.
All right, do I have a second to that motion?
Second.
All right, any discussion? There is none. All in favor of adjourning? Aye. Any opposed? All right, we will close this meeting then, and
Take a quick
did you-
break, and your Zoom link is in your calendar invite for the DEI. So we'll see you on the other side.
all right, meet up about